For, well, over a decade now, we've heard this narrative, right? Cryptocurrency as this huge technological revolution.
Hmm.
Ever since Satoshi Nakamoto's white paper back in '08, a lot of talk about fundamentally reshaping the world.
Yeah, absolutely. That's been the dominant story.
But what if? What if the real story isn't about the tech itself? What if it's something different?
That's exactly what we're digging into today. We've been looking at some material that really pushes a different idea.
Okay.
That the main driver behind crypto isn't necessarily, that kind of groundbreaking tech disruption we usually talk about,
Right.
but something maybe more subtle, regulatory arbitrage.
Regulatory arbitrage. Okay, hang on. So instead of amazing new tech changing everything, the idea is that crypto's success, its relevance, it's tied to how it navigates existing rules, maybe even uses loopholes.
Precisely.
Yeah,
That's the argument. It's definitely a different angle than the usual crypto is the future pitch we hear all the time.
it really is.
Right.
So how do we unpack that?
Well, the sources we looked at lay out 5 main arguments to back this up. They really challenge that conventional wisdom.
5 arguments. Okay.
Yeah. So we'll look at why the core value might not be the tech itself. Then the power of the crypto wallet, but on the delivery side.
Delivery side, interesting.
Then we'll really define this regulatory arbitrage idea, why it's the supposed X factor. After that, there's this sort of paradox. The tension between crypto being on the fringes versus going mainstream.
Okay. Marginality versus mainstreaming.
Exactly. And finally, we touch on the people involved, the mix of beliefs and, well, their sometimes contradictory realities within the crypto community.
Okay.
So the goal for this deep dive is really to step back from the hype, use this lens of regulatory arbitrage, and hopefully give you a clearer, maybe more nuanced picture of crypto's past, present, and maybe its future.
All right, sounds good. Let's jump into that first argument then, the core value one. It pushes back hard on crypto being all about revolutionary tech.
It does.
It uses the internet and mobile internet as comparisons, as true game changers.
Yeah.
How did they change things so drastically?
Well, the key difference highlighted is the impact on the supply side.
Yeah.
Think about the internet, how it just blew open content creation and access to information.
Right, suddenly anyone could publish, anyone could find almost anything.
Exactly. Made things incredibly more efficient, cheaper, faster, arguably like a tenfold improvement, maybe more.
Okay.
And mobile internet did something similar, right? Connecting people to services anytime, anywhere. Again, a huge leap in how things were produced and delivered.
Totally transformed things. But the argument here is that crypto, well, it hasn't really done that on the supply side, not that same massive jump.
That's the point the sources make, yeah. They look at, say, Web3 social platforms.
Right.
Are they really faster or better than something like Weibo for just, basic use?
Well, probably not for most people.
Or decentralized exchanges? They have unique features, sure, but are they inherently smoother or more efficient for the average trader than, say, Binance or Coinbase? Maybe not.
And GameFi.
GameFi, too.
Huh.
It's debatable if it offers a fundamentally better gaming experience than massive hits like Honor of Kings. So the core idea is crypto hasn't yet shown that order of magnitude improvement on the supply side, the kind of leap we saw with the internet.
Okay, so if it's not this massive tech leap in how things are made or provided, why is it still here? Why has it grown? This is where regulatory arbitrage comes back in.
That's the argument, yeah. That's presented as the key driver. The sources suggest its persistence, its growth, isn't mainly because the underlying tech is vastly superior in these core functions. Instead, its legitimacy, its practical use, comes from its ability to operate within regulatory gaps, or maybe alongside existing regulations in clever ways.
So it's finding its niche by working around the current system, not necessarily trying to blow it up entirely.
That seems to be the core contention. It's less about outright replacement, more about strategic positioning within the existing regulatory landscape.
Okay, that makes a lot more sense when you frame it that way.
Yeah.
So the tech is part of it, obviously, but its real traction comes from interacting with regulations.
Right.
Now, the second argument you mentioned shifts to the delivery side, the wallet. You said it's more than just a place to hold coins.
Oh, definitely. The material really emphasizes the wallet's potential versatility. It's not just storage. Think of it more like a potential command center.
A command center, how so?
Well, imagine integrating payments like Alipay, information feeds like WeChat official accounts, trading like a stock account, even identity verification, and storage like a bank. All potentially rolled into one decentralized tool.
Wow. Okay, that's quite a package.
It is. And the key insight isn't just the convenience of having it all in one place. but the potential for creating this powerful financial hub that operates, well, potentially outside some of the traditional controls.
And a big part of that is the peer-to-peer value transfer, right?
Yeah.
Compared to old school finance.
Yes, exactly. That direct P2P capability is crucial. It cuts out intermediaries, cuts out their costs, their delays.
Right.
The sources bring up cross-border transfers as a prime example. We all know traditional bank transfers across borders can be slow, expensive, lots of steps.
Painfully slow sometimes, yeah.
Crypto wallets, though, can often handle that much faster, and usually for a lot less money. This efficiency on the delivery side, moving value directly, is presented as a really significant competitive advantage.
Got it. So the wallet isn't just holding stuff, it's changing how stuff moves. Okay, let's really zoom in on regulatory arbitrage itself now. Argument 3 calls it the X factor. What does that mean here? How is it more than just finding loopholes?
Well, the sources define it as making strategic business choices based on differences or gaps in regulations. Could be between countries or even within one country where the rules are maybe unclear or haven't caught up.
Okay.
They argue Bitcoin itself initially wasn't just about faster payments. It was also an experiment. Like, can we operate outside the traditional financial rules? A sort of cross-border test of the regulatory system.
Interesting framing.
And then you look at things like USDT, the stablecoin, or DeFi protocols. Their very existence, their growth, often comes down to navigating these, let's say, less defined regulatory spaces for digital assets and finance.
And you mentioned the origin of the word arbitrage.
Yeah, they point out it comes from French, meaning to judge or to rule. So in this context, it's less about the typical finance, meaning exploiting tiny price differences.
Right.
It's more about making smarter judgments, better rulings, if you will, about how to operate effectively within these regulatory gray zones. Where are the opportunities, given the current rules?
So it's about informed strategic decision-making in fuzzy areas.
Exactly. And the argument is that is the fundamental reason Bitcoin got traction early on. And it's what continues to drive a lot of the innovation in crypto. It's not a side effect, it's core. The X factor.
Okay, that's a powerful idea. It's not a bug, it's the main feature driving growth. Which leads nicely into the fourth argument, this paradox you mentioned, marginality versus mainstreaming. Why did Bitcoin take, 15 years to get even sort of mainstream? And why was being on the fringes actually a good thing initially?
The idea is that being on the periphery, outside the spotlight of heavy regulation, gave crypto essential breathing room.
Breathing room?
Yeah. These gray areas, often poorly regulated, often with information asymmetry, where some people know more than others.
Which regulation often tries to prevent in traditional markets.
Right. But these conditions allowed innovators to take bigger risks, to try things out, experiment more freely. That freedom, that risk-taking, is what ultimately built the crypto ecosystem we have today.
So the lack of rules, in a way, fostered the innovation. But what happens when it does go mainstream? The argument suggests that's not necessarily all good for crypto's original spirit.
Exactly. As crypto gets bigger, attracts more mainstream attention, regulation inevitably follows. And those arbitrage opportunities, they shrink.
Makes sense. Regulators catch up.
They catch up. And innovation often gets pushed into more compliant channels, which might be necessary, but maybe less radical, less disruptive than the early days.
So less Wild West.
Sort of. The sources mention examples like compliant blockchains launched by big Web 2 companies or enterprise chains. Sometimes they end up looking, well, neither like traditional finance nor like the original decentralized crypto. Kind of stuck in the middle.
Neither fish nor fowl, as they say.
Right. So the very marginality that allowed it to thrive initially could be threatened by mainstream success, potentially diluting what made it unique in the first place.
That's a fascinating tension. Does success ultimately kill the revolutionary potential? Okay, that brings us to the last argument. The people, the community, and this tension between beliefs and reality. Sounds complex.
It really is. And what's insightful here is acknowledging that mix of motivations. You definitely have idealists in crypto, people genuinely seeking a fairer, more transparent system.
Sure, you hear that a lot.
But they're also operating in a world that, let's be honest, runs on information asymmetry, desire, power. And yes, arbitrage opportunities. The sources point this out quite clearly.
Right, and it highlights some contradictions, doesn't it? Like disliking centralization but using centralized exchanges to make money.
Exactly. Or promoting Web3 freedom but relying heavily on, influencer endorsements or big VCs.
Or talking about don't be evil while building things that explicitly leverage regulatory loopholes.
Right. There are these inherent tensions, but the sources suggest Maybe we shouldn't just label it hypocrisy. Perhaps it's more a reflection of complex human nature grappling with a new, volatile, often ambiguous market. The idea is to see participants less as pure saints, driven only by ideals,
And more as
more as players, strategic actors navigating a complex game, using the tools and opportunities available, driven by a mix of idealism and pragmatism.
players, not saints.
Ah,
Yeah.
And understanding that tension, that mix of belief and reality, is presented as really crucial if you want to navigate crypto effectively long-term, to survive the cycles, maybe profit, and achieve whatever your goals are in the space.
So acknowledging the human element, the messy reality alongside the ideals, actually helps you understand the space better.
It leads to a more realistic, probably more resilient approach, yes.
Yeah.
Recognizing those dynamics is key.
Okay. So wrapping this all up then, this deep dive really challenges the standard crypto narrative. The main takeaway isn't tech revolution, it isn't world transformation necessarily.
But regulatory arbitrage, that's the central thread, the underlying force that the sources argue, has shaped crypto's path far more than we usually acknowledge.
Right. We saw how that plays out with the wallet's delivery power, how innovation thrives in those regulatory gaps.
And that constant push and pull between staying on the fringes where there's freedom and moving into the mainstream, which brings acceptance but also constraints.
So understanding this regulatory arbitrage angle is really key, isn't it? For anyone involved in crypto or even just watching it, whether you're thinking about longevity, profit, or just getting a handle on what's actually going on.
Absolutely. It provides a different, maybe more grounded framework.
Which leaves us with a final thought for you, the listener. Thinking through this lens of regulatory arbitrage, how does that change your view of crypto, your understanding of its past, or maybe your predictions for its future?
Yeah, it encourages you to look past just the tech promises, doesn't it? To see that intricate dance between innovation, human motivation, and the ever-present landscape of rules and regulations. That interplay seems to be where the real story is unfolding.